What's up YouTube, Duel here from Zephyr, and today I'm bringing you more commentary from a live Duel locals. On the right we have myself on 6 Samurai, and on the left we have Fire Kings. So this is Fire King Dogmatica with a slight bit of a budget. We're starting off with a 6 sound combo with Dojo, Normal Summon, the Tactical Master. And the reason that I choose to Normal Summon down the Tactical Master is for the pure fact that it can actually act as not only an asceticism target, which you're about to see, but it also means that I can save if I've opened up multiples its Special Summon effect, because obviously you can't Special Summon a Tactical Master if you already control a Tactical Master. So we can see that Dojo is currently building up some counters, and we're going to link both of these off. We're going to chain block our Battle Shogun, and then we're going to go chaining 1 Battle Shogun, chaining 2 Tactical Master. The Battle Shogun, of course, is going to discard as cost Dark Ruler and no more, and that's going to get hit with an Imperm. So this is the first kind of time that the Battle Shogun that you will see on Duel gets interacted with, and it kind of makes the build or the board a little bit more awkward due to that interaction. So we still get the double strike, we still got Dojo into rotation, so we can still kind of attempt to accumulate forms of Bushido counters. Now obviously without Gateway and rotation, it's always going to be interesting to see how the deck then operates, because that's where it gets a little bit interesting as to what the deck can do if it doesn't have direct access to the Gateway. Now, knowing that my opponent's on Fire Kings, this is where the second Tactical Master comes into play. I get to Special Summon it down. Unfortunately, because the Battle Shogun was fully negated, it won't start gaining any more counters. But it's now up to me if I decide to link these off, which is exactly what I'm going to do. And this is going to get me into another Battle Shogun, and this will allow me to start to accumulate some Bushido counters on it. We still got the double strike. We still have the ability to get rid of the Dojo, which is going to allow me to summon a 6 sound monster from the deck. I'm just double checking the counter, or like how many counters it can kind of produce. Now getting rid of 4 counters on this one can give me access to something like Hatsume, but it also gives me access to the Anarchist. Now the reason we're going for the Anarchist is it will get me something like Cunning, and with the double strike I'm able to bring back a level 3 so that I can get myself into a Shien. So I start to regain a bit of hand advantage, which will ultimately allow me to regain a bit of board presence. Now, unfortunately, I don't have another card that will take Bushido counters from them, so it is literally just going to be minimizing the kind of interactions here. So we can see that my opponent's got Nibiru, which is quite damaging, but I've got the ability to negate it off the back of the Shien now, which is quite effective. We also saw that they have an Ash Blossom, so that can be quite damaging on top of it. I suppose they could have very easily ashed the Asceticism, but I think they were waiting to see how far it would go. Keep in mind that 6 Sams are still relatively new, so they weren't fully rounded with what the deck can do and how it operates. But then they still ended up stopping the Grandmaster, which is the Battle Shogun, which is a big issue. So we search out the Great Shogun, and we also do search out the Cunning. I suppose these are like one of the best and most ideal kind of boards, because with what I had, because this will set me up with the ability my opponent can only activate 1 spell or trap, meaning that if they're on Fire Kings, they can activate Fire King Island, or they can activate Sanctuary, but then they're not going to be able to activate another. We've got a monster negate off the back of the Shien as well, so we've got a bit of protection, and they're all relatively strong monsters. Keeping in mind that the Battle Shogun is currently up to 1200 attack, because it gains 100 attack for each Bushido counter on the field, which is really, really helpful. So we go with Fire King Island. They seem that they decide to destroy the Avatar. Obviously, we saw the hand was Ash Blossom plus Ash Blossom plus Nibiru. So the idea was that they were probably trying to get to the Grunix. They probably felt that the Ash was more important to keep a hold of, but I feel that they probably should have normal summoned down the Avatar and then used the Fire King Island to destroy the Ash, because in that in turn would still get them access to the Grunix and then still give them an Avatar on the board, which would have been a bit more defensive. Anyway, the Grunix is kind of met with the Shien while it's in the hand, and it looks like is there a Kirin in that hand? It looked like there was a Kirin, but I could be wrong. Anyway, we top that Dojo for turn. We're going to activate the Dojo. And now the question is, like, what are we going to do? Because unfortunately, we don't have any Bushido counters accumulated anywhere. And I feel that it's at this point that I realise going into the second Battle Shogun just wasn't massively worth it. Because now I don't have another way to gateway, because I'm only playing 2 of the Battle Shogun. So I really need to recycle the first one in order to get that going. So it's all about just thinking, okay, well, now where do we kind of go from here? Damage-wise on the board, we're still in a very good position, because we've got about 5k between the 2 Shiens, and then 1,200 off of the back of the Battle Shogun. So the idea is that during the battle phase, I can go Cunning, and then Cunning can send the Shien and then summon back the Shien. So that's going to give you my OTK, but I don't see it just yet. I'm still just trying to figure it out. And then it's like, oh, yeah, okay, of course, I've got it. Let me just double check the maths on this one. Where can we go? And then it's obviously whether they decide to activate a monster effect. Now, if they activate Kirin, that's probably like the biggest issue, is if it is a Kirin, because then the Shogun would destroy the Kirin in hand. And then by destroying it, it then gets negated. And then we've got the Garunix in the graveyard. So if we then use the Shien to negate the Garunix, which is exactly what we're going to do, it then means that the Garunix isn't going to float back to the board, which just causes me more issues, because then it can send another one from the deck to the grave, which could in theory be a Kirin. Now, this is where I kind of messed up a little bit, because what I should have done is I should have activated the Cunning a lot earlier, and both of us missed this type of play anyway. But you see how it evolves. Obviously, they've Kirin during the main phase. We're just debating whether we still go to the battle phase. We are going to still continue to the battle phase eventually. It's just kind of figuring out how do you get past that Kirin, because as soon as you kill it, it can then bring back the Avatar, and then if you kill the Avatar then brings one back as well. So it's just like double floating. But the idea is you kind of want to be able to negate and stop it coming through. And that's kind of where the Cunning comes into play, is you want to attack with the Shien as it's already activated its negate. But it looks like we've done this all completely wrong. So the Battle Shogun would attack, the Kirin then destroys the Shien, but they didn't use the effect of Kirin to summon back, which they should have done, because to do that, they then need to bring one back. So the idea would have been that there would be an Avatar on this board. And then what would have happened is I go Cunning, send the Grand Soldier, bring back. So this would all happen earlier. So while there's an Avatar on the board, I would then attack with the Battle Shogun, kill the Avatar declares to use its effect, then use the Shogun to negate it. So we're in the same board state. Basically what I'm trying to say is this is how the board state is fixed. So how this outcome is still the same as it would have been. So nothing's really changed. But yes, admittedly, both of us missed that Kirin needed to bring back. So anyway, they go draw phase, they attempt to activate the Super Poly, discarding the nib, and then they're trying to find what targets they can use. But unfortunately, none of the targets are actually legal, because Garura needs both to be the same attribute and same type, which neither of these are, and Mud Dragon needs them to be the same attribute but different types, which these aren't, because you've got a fire and a dark, and then you've got both of them are warriors. So there was no legal Super Poly targets to be used on this one. Otherwise, that would have been massively damaging, because that would have cleared both those off, and I would have been left with pretty much nothing. Like a Fuma, I think, is the best thing I could get from that. So then kind of comes down to, well, what else can be done? So I draw for turn, and attack for game, and then go to game 2. So bit of a misplay from Fire King, but when we get to Swift into game 2, it looks like I've hard opened up 2 Dark Rule No More, Cosmic Cyclone, and a Crossout Designator with a Shien Smoke Signal. So Fire Kings are going first. They're going to activate the Fire King Island using the effect to destroy the Avatar. I would be very curious to see how many Avatars that they are playing. And they go for the Garunix play. Now, I believe at this moment in time, they didn't actually own an Volcanix, which might explain some of the routes of play on this one, because they seem to like to go directly for the Garunix, which is slightly interesting for me. But at least with the Garunix, you can then destroy the Kirin. The Kirin would then bring back the Avatar. So that would then get them a negate on the board, which is probably what you want, which looks like exactly what they're doing. So they're going to be destroying the Kirin. Kirin brings back the Avatar, which makes sense of destroying the Avatar now with that particular route of play. Sets them up the negate, and then they're just trying to figure out the Kirin. So it's, I believe Kirin is summon, then destroy. I was trying to remember these exact wording of text on them. So he then decides to destroy the Avatar, which is very interesting, to bring back the Garunix to go for a... for rank 8, which again confuses me on this one, because I'm like, well, I think you see in their hand, they're playing Dogmatica Punishment, and you're like, well, do you really need it? And it kind of made me think, well, would you rather... It didn't make any difference because I had the Dark Ruler, but it was like, well, do you want the spell negate, or do you want the... did you want the monster negate? I suppose the spell negate's not that bad, because then it means if you haven't opened up an Imperm or anything like that, is if I do go to Battle Shogun, then it gets hit with a... it'll get hit with the... When I try and activate the Gateway, it'll then get hit with the Hope Harbinger. Anyway, so we're going to activate Cosmic. We're going to get rid of that back row. I don't think there's anything like on the board that's that damaging for me. We get ashed on the Smoke Signal, which is a bit of annoyance, but then that's where Crossout comes into play. So we're going to activate the cross out, we'll banish the Ash, and this will allow me to resolve the smoke signal, because you can tell with the type of hand I opened, which was a load of board breakers, I'm going to need that. So Kageki normal, special summon down Kizaru. Kizaru's effect is going to go off, and this is going to get me the Anarchist. And now I'm kind of in a, there's one card left in hand that is unknown. So it's like, do you go for the Battle Shogun or do you go for the Shien? So it really depends on what you have access to. I can go for the Shien, or of course I can go for the Battle Shogun. Going to Shien will probably be the safer route, because now I go Shien. Shien can then trigger its effect, and then Anarchist can trigger the effect as well. Meaning that Shien can get me that extender that I would need in order to get into the Battle Shogun, and I can get the Asceticism, which can then obviously activate as another extension to the board as well. So we've got a lot to kind of play with here. We can summon down the Great Shogun as well. This will then give me access to the Battle Shogun, because it's a warrior plus a 6 sand monster. So it doesn't matter that you use another Shien monster. Gets me into the Battle Shogun. The only thing I did here is I didn't chain block it. But we know that Ash has already been used, so there was very few things that I would need to chain block specifically from it. And now it's only just kind of figuring out, what do I want to discard? Do I discard the Asceticism, or do I need the Asceticism to build me counters? And where else can you go from here? So it's a very, very interesting outcome to figure out what's there. Because I feel that if I discard a card I didn't have, so I discarded Kizan, and I think it's at this point where it's like, I didn't have enough to get the amount of Bushido counters on the board that I needed. So this is where I've kind of done like a bit of a misplay, because you go Asceticism, target the Grandmaster. This would then give me more Bushido counters, because you go for Uraza, which gives me 2 on Gateway, 1 on the Shogun. And then it's like, unfortunately, the only way that I can get another Bushido counter to keep them all moving would be to link off into another Grandmaster, Battle Shogun. So my opponent's under Dark Ruler, so it is kind of like ideally pushing yourself towards getting more negates. And at this exact moment in time, none of my cards are strong enough to get rid of that Hope Harbinger. And the Hope Harbinger can be a bit of an issue later on. So it really does come down to, can you find a way to produce more Bushido counters in order to get everything going? Now, ultimately, there's 2 options here. If I want to keep the monster negate on the board, if I am worried about Nibiru, which is exactly what happens, I sacrifice that 1 counter from the Battle Shogun. So it gets the 4 onto the Gateway. We use Gateway. This will then allow me to grab a Tactical Master, which will act as an extension later on. And this is where you're basically subbing out, because you'll go Tactical Master. This is going to give you 3. And then it's whether you go for another 6 sound monster or not. Now, unfortunately, there is no 6 sound monster for me to go to, but we do go into an Omega. And the reason that we're going to do this is by sending the Tactical Master to the graveyard, that will give me double strike. And then Omega can get rid of that last card, which is Nibiru. So we get to chain the Omega, which rips in Nibiru, and then Nibiru doesn't resolve. So that's kind of like the idea, is that you needed to play around Nib, which is exactly what you saw here. We're going to go with a double strike. Double strike is going to bring back the Tactical Master, which of course in turn will give me a 2nd counter on the Grandmaster, the Battle Shogun, and 2 on the Gateway, which will allow me to get a Kizan, which can set me up for another Shien. So the idea is you just constantly keep going round and round in loops in order to set up these negates. So we're going back for we've got 5 Bushido counters on the board currently as it stands. This will then allow me to synchro into another Synchro 6, which can go into a Nishi. And Nishi will then allow me to get rid of that Battle Shogun. Sorry, not the Battle Shogun, the Hope Harbinger. And it's obviously going to allow me to accumulate more. And then the best thing about that is when a Nishi leaves the board, it actually allows you to bring back one of your banished 6 Sams. So again, just kind of looping more resource, which is really, really important. I'm going to take off 8 counters in total to get 2 Kizans. I'm going to summon down 1 Kizan, which is going to produce 2 tokens or 2 counters on the Gateway. So we're going to get back up to 5 Bushido counters. And then it's basically trying to build up a defensive board that my opponent can't deal with, because we've kind of burnt away all of their resource. They literally are top decking with Fire King Island, but that can be quite damaging, because if they top deck a fire monster, then within reason, Fire King Island can let them go off again, especially with a Garunix in the graveyard. So it's just figuring out what negates we can set up that can be of help to us as well. So go for the Grandmaster. The reason for this one is if you want to, you can get a another one into play. You can get a Synchro level 8. So go Abyss Dweller to turn off the Garunix and the Avatar and the Unicorn. Sorry, Kirin. There we go. Take 4 Bushido counters off. Summon down the Kizan. Now we've got Saruja play if we want it. We've got the Abyss Dweller to turn off that graveyard, so it does mean if they do top deck a fire monster, it doesn't make any difference whatsoever. The Inishi will bring me back one of my banished 6-Sams, which will bring me back. Unfortunately, I didn't do this in the right way. I should have banished another 6-Sam, but the only one I had was the the General. It's going to give me 2 more Bushido counters. We're going to draw 4, and then we're going to put 3 back. So whatever card we don't feel is of any use to us. So you see straight away all 3 of those went back. Take away 4, add any 6-Sam monster we want. So you're probably going to want to go for Hatsume at this point. You get the additional special summon off of the back of the Saruja for Hatsume, putting 2 more counters on the Gateway. Going to banish 2 6-Sams in order to bring 1 back, which now sets me up for a Synchro 6 or for a Synchro 5, depending on what I want to bring back. 5 is probably going to be more effective for me, just for that monster effect. Like, if they do top deck the most broken normal summon in the world, I can go with that. But it looks like I've decided to go for a 5. We've got Dojo, which I probably should have activated before all of this, because then it would have had more Bushido counters on it. So big da on that one. But now we're going to be Synchro into a 5. So you go for the original Shien, which will give me more Bushido counters in rotation. And I think I'm trying to work my way up to get to 6 Bushido counters to bring back a Shien monster. Obviously, I can't bring back the Synchro. Big sad, because it's She space Shien, which is really annoying. But bring back the Master. Got more Bushido counters on the board now. We're just kind of, with Dojo, you kind of want to get it to a point where you have enough counters on it for a Synchro monster. A tuner. And that's where Fuma can come into play as well. So we're just debating on which card to add back, because now we're kind of in this position of, okay, we don't have a lot of space. So if we add back the Kizan, we're going to take away 1 from the Dojo, which is going to somersault out the Fuma, which then lets me Synchro into a 6, which now means I've got a monster and a spell negate. So there's not really anything they can be putting on the board that's going to pressure me. Even though they're under Dark Ruler, it literally is just, okay, well, the worst thing that could possibly be top deck that will cause me an issue could be X, Y, or Z. And at the moment, I've got a monster negate. Like, the worst thing they could do is top deck a Dark Ruler. And even then, they still need to have another Fire Monster. So I really don't think there is any top deck that breaks this board that I can think of with only that and Fire King Island in play. Because you can activate the Fire King Island, but as soon as you try and destroy a monster, we'll get rid of that. Get rid of the Grunix. I probably should have got rid of the Fire King Island. Because the Grunix was kind of dealt with the Abyss Dweller. Regardless, we remove 6 Bushido counters, draw phase, activate that, and then they've got Sanctuary. Anyway, I hope this has given you a bit of an insight in the deck. Any questions, ask in the comments below. I'd be more than happy to answer them.